What happens when you combine a deeply human anti-hero, a demon who refuses to let him leave his life of constant sorrow, a world firmly grounded in reality, and surreal events that push both of them to their breaking point, with a delicate balance of suspense, horror, deep character moments, fantasies, and comedy? You get one of the best episodes of television in recent years. Barry, Season 2, Episode 5, Ronny, Lily. In 30 minutes, Bill Hader masterfully navigated the complicated relationship of the show's two main characters by throwing them down a pit of increasingly reality-bending situations, spawned by a choice that established the growing humanity of the show's titular character. This episode had the courage to push the bounds on the reality that the show is rooted in, for the purpose of driving home the cause and effect of a toxic relationship. And it was written by, directed by, and starring the same person. This is Bill Hader's masterpiece. This is the best episode of one of the best shows on television. This is Ronny, Lily.
You want to tell this story? You need to tell this story.
By this point in the show, we have established the following bits of important information. Barry is currently a man in the middle of two lives. One of being a highly skilled hitman, and one of yearning for peace, love, and normalcy. Fuchs has been the only person there for Barry, and the only one Barry can fully confide in. Barry is also indebted to Fuchs for his role in sweeping his rage-fueled Korengal civilian murder under the rug. Fuchs has parlayed his position in Barry's life into using him to carry out continued acts of violence by way of what Barry is so good at. Barry wants to separate himself from this life, but he struggles to do so because of what he has done both at war and in his time working under Fuchs. Gene is becoming a father-like figure to Barry, and Barry opening up to him led to the revelation that he can change and become a different, better, and happier person. The problem is that Barry killed Detective Moss, whom Gene had fallen in love with, after she learned too much about why Barry came to Los Angeles in the first place. His past actions limit how vulnerable he can be with Gene. The same goes for Sally, the woman he has fallen in love with. Moss's detective partner, Loach, found out that Barry executed the hit that led off the show and killed Moss. Loach got Fuchs to sell Barry out, leading to a confrontation wherein he used his knowledge of Barry's actions to blackmail him into killing his ex-wife's new boyfriend, Ronny Proxon, in exchange for his crimes being swept under the rug. All of those bits of information are relevant to episode 5 of season 2. The tension between Barry and Fuchs has steadily risen throughout the series, but now they are presented with an opportunity to wipe their slate clean if they do what Loach wants them to do. Of course, the problem is that Barry doesn't want to kill anymore. He wants to be a different person, and his conversation with Gene put those feelings into high gear, reaching a breaking point in episode 5. What the show does so brilliantly is presenting this person with an evil past as a person you sympathize with and desperately root for. But since this video is solely about the episode and not the show, I won't dive into that here. But if you'd like a video on the whole series ahead of season 3 in April, let me know. The fact that you root for Barry makes everything in this show more interesting. You find yourself constantly yelling at the screen when he makes a decision that sets himself back, and you feel genuine relief when he does something to better himself. Episode 5 of season 2 puts those feelings at odds. While Barry seeks to move on from his past, he is time and again forced to reckon with it. In this episode, Barry's ideals, both of the present and the past, come to a head. He is tasked with literally killing his past, which seemingly defeats the point entirely. Are you really changing if you're still falling into your worst vice? The answer is no, and Barry knows that, which is why he goes to Ronny's home without a weapon and plans on talking to him and being honest with him. This isn't a fairy tale though, so simply being honest with someone won't necessarily lead to a happy ending. Ronny is a Taekwondo champion, and he tries to fight his way out of the situation. Eventually defeating Ronny wasn't the end of the conflict though. Barry now has to deal with the little girl. After she finds her dad dead on the floor, she transforms into a demon and thoroughly kicks Barry's ass for 90 seconds. What happens at the end of the fight is important. Instead of killing Barry, Lily drops the knife and runs away. When Ronny reappears at the end of the episode, he tries to kill Barry again, resulting in his death. To me, Lily and Ronny represent the conflict inside of Barry. Much like Barry watching his friend get shot in the Korengal Valley, Lily sees a loved one dying on the ground, while Barry retaliated by killing an innocent civilian in rage. Lily doesn't allow herself to reach that point. She doesn't seek revenge or murder. Through her innocence, she represents the peace that Barry seeks. Ronny represents the man Barry was and is trying not to be. Like Barry, Ronny is a master at what he does. And what he does is do violence onto others. While he managed to survive 2 blows that should have been fatal, he ends up dying in the end. He even attacked an innocent bystander out of pure rage, like Barry did overseas. Barry has relapsed into his evil doings numerous times, and he too survived those relapses. But if he continues down that path, he is destined to die, just like Ronny did. Barry generally feels grounded in its own reality, which is a notch or 2 above our own. While things tend to be slightly elevated in the show's universe, it still lands well within our suspension of disbelief. This episode takes a big risk though, purposefully expanding its realm of possibility to the point where a man survives a broken windpipe and a gunshot wound through the head, and a little girl is a vicious taekwondo demon spawn who climbs trees and peers down from the top of a garage. These are things that, if not masterfully executed, would result in a total disconnect with an audience whose expectations of the reality the show is set in has been established. They do one hugely important thing that makes the fantastical nature of the final 20 minutes of the episode come across as believable. The episode opens with 7.5 minutes of long, uncut shots that progress at a realistic pace. The camera follows Ronny through his home and stays glued on his face as Barry confronts him. The fight scene is one 2-minute and 57-second long take, and every second of it feels real and grounded. From the jump, you're engaged in this episode. The lack of cuts is a great way to do it, but on top of that, we're not panning all over the room during the fight scene. It feels like you're really there in the room with them, cautiously keeping your distance as everything falls apart. When it spills into the bathroom, you don't follow them in there. Instead, you stay in the bedroom and see their shadows against the door. The slow-paced, realistic opening to the episode sets the groundwork for a series of events that gradually escalates in its surrealism. It doesn't slap you in the face with Demon Girl in the opening 5 minutes. If you reverse the order of these events, going from less to more grounded, you won't get the same result. A grandiose opening, de-escalating into a grounded ending, would feel anticlimactic and jarring, considering the established rules of the world it's set in. It's clearly inspired by The Sopranos Season 3 episode, Barrens. The similarities between the episode's A-plot with Paulie and Chris and the lone plot line in this episode of Barry are front and center from start to finish. What starts as a seemingly easy task turns into a series of events that cascades down a mountain of worst-case scenarios that border on dreamlike and otherworldly. In both examples, the execution and story are so tight that instead of losing you, they captivate you and leave you searching for answers. Neither of those episodes give you all the answers though, because you don't need them. The mysteries of the episode aren't the point, the characters are. You see how greed, ego, and power dynamics play into how the characters act towards each other in times of crisis. While it's easy to get distracted by the events that move the story from point A to point B, the heart of the episode is the relationship between its characters. We know where Barry currently sits in his arc. He is right down the middle of 2 lives. Fuchs, however, is the epitome of decisive. Fuchs uses Barry like a disposable weapon. The problem is that Barry isn't disposable for Fuchs. Without him, Fuchs will find himself in situations that he can't resolve on his own, and he will no longer be able to profit on Barry's killer instinct. His manipulation is what keeps Barry around. While he intermittently acts like he sympathizes with Barry and cares about him, every decision he makes is geared towards his own self-gain and greed. When he believes that Barry took care of things and his problem is solved, he laments the idea that he had to kill a little girl and shows sympathy. But the second that Barry tells him the girl is still alive, he drops the act and puts his intentions on full display. As Barry bleeds out in his car, Fuchs isn't concerned with his well-being. His sole focus is hunting down and killing the girl. He wants to complete the mission. Fuchs has always been there for Barry, but it's not because he loves him, it's because he can get something out of him. This is portrayed through Barry's dreams, which carry so much great imagery and symbolism. In sequences of soldiers happily reuniting with their families, the only person there to greet Barry is Fuchs, who wears a dark suit and a dark red shirt. He stands in the valley of the desert, backlit by the setting sun. It's as beautiful as it is sinister. He isn't an angel, he's the devil. As a smile comes across Barry's face, Fuchs doesn't hug him or say anything to him. He silently gestures and walks off. Barry's smile disappears. Fuchs' connection to Barry isn't one of family, it's one of business and profit, which is why he's wearing a suit jacket and pants while the other families are dressed casually. At the end of the episode, Barry looks to escape from the alley, but he only has one way out. At the end of the alley is Fuchs, in his car, there for him. He imagines his silent gesture, but in reality, he's yelling at him to get in the car. Horns and sirens blare, Barry realizes his reality, and he is petrified. Throughout the episode, we hear the sound of a clock in the background, symbolizing that time is running out on Barry's ability to live 2 lives. And when that clock makes its final tick, a bomb will go off that won't leave anyone unscathed. Ronny Lily is an excellently written, surrealist story told in a grounded universe, with style, creativity, and imagination. It's the spiritual successor to Barrens in the way that it delves into reality-bending events as a means of exploring 2 troubled characters at their most desperate state. The episode brazenly shifts tones from moment to moment and scene to scene, with masterful editing and execution. It's a huge part of what makes Barry, well, Barry. Bill Hader tells a basic story with an imaginative and elevated take on the world he has created. And notice how I haven't once mentioned the comedic moments in the episode, which are so perfectly timed that they feel natural and real to the characters. Stephen Root truly shines with his delivery of some of the most hilarious lines and moments of the episode, from his transparent lack of sincerity with Barry, to his arrogance in dealing with Lily, to his emotionally charged yell as she runs off.
What are you?
To his outrageously self-centered actions biting him in the ass, or I guess cheek. He comes through with banger after banger, and it's all real to the character, and a side effect of who we know him to be in this show. This is the stuff that Barry does episode in and episode out, that makes it stand out in a TV and streaming landscape full of posers. This show is the real deal, and it continuously outdoes itself over time. This is TV at its finest.